Hello and welcome back to another video. I'm Jag from Jag's Watches, and this is a watch channel that doesn't take itself too seriously. I have been waiting to make this video for such a long time. I finally bought my first watch, and what a feeling. It was none of the watches that were on my shortlist. If you've watched my previous videos, you know I've mentioned a couple of different watches, the Oyster Perpetual, the Tudor Harrods, as well as a couple of Grand Seikos, but it ended up being my vintage Grail watch, which makes it so special. Now, before I get into it, I just want to say a huge thank you to all the viewers. We hit 100 subscribers, we hit the first milestone, but I'm going to ask you, if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe if you've been enjoying the content. We're trying to get to 500 subscribers. So, going back to the video, I bought my first watch, and I want you to cast your memory back to the first time you bought your watch, your first watch, and I want you to let me know down in the comments what watch that was and how you felt. If there's a story attached to it, let me know as well. So let's not delay too much. The watch that I ended up buying was the 1965 Breitling Top Time reference 2002. This is a watch that I had been looking to buy for the past 4 to 5 years. It's as I said, my vintage Grail, but the way that I ended up buying this watch was just purely, by chance. As usual, I was perusing on the vintage watch stores, just checking what sort of watches were out there, and I always keep an eye on this particular reference because it was a watch that I definitely knew I was going to pick up at some point in my life. Did I know it was going to be the first watch that I buy? No. But it was in such great condition, box and papers, and recently the key thing that really made me go for it was the fact that, firstly, it was a great price, but secondly, it was serviced by Breitling 3 years ago, and of course, there's one worry when you buy a vintage watch, especially one from the 60s, 50s, 40s, that there's a lot of costs involved when it comes to servicing. So I didn't have that worry in my head. So I pulled the trigger and I bought it. So you may be wondering why the Breitling Top Time is my vintage Grail. It's a watch that isn't really talked about much, but at the time it was a watch that was compared to the Daytona and the Hoya Carrera. So it was up against some great competition at the time. And of course, if you know and you've watched my previous videos, you know I'm a big James Bond fan. So the fact that Sean Connery wore this in Thunderball was another reason to get it. It's for me going to be a watch that will always be a classic, especially for those watch enthusiasts that like Breitling, and maybe those that don't even like Breitling, because it being a 36mm case, I feel like those that hate Breitling would actually consider this watch as well. It has a minimalist dial, simple pushers, and perfect proportions at 36mm. And I want to touch upon the fact that it's 36mm. My wrists are 6 3/4 inches, so I don't have the huge wrists. However, I always kind of gravitate towards watches that are around 40mm in diameter, pushing 42mm. You know that I have the Seamaster, the No Time to Die Seamaster, which is at 42mm, and I don't think I would go any bigger than that. 36mm I thought would be a little bit too small for my wrists. However, with this particular design, I have to say that it really suits it. The pushers are very large, so that adds to the diameter, almost to illusion that it is actually a bigger watch than it is. However, it being vintage, I think you can get away with it being a smaller watch. But let's be honest, what really sold me about this particular watch was the dial. This is one of the most beautiful dials I have ever seen in person. The indices, the 2 sub-dials, and the original hands, but just that faint Breitling Geneve that you've got on the 12 o'clock, and then at the 6 o'clock, the top time. It's just perfect. I mean, the way that the light plays with the subdials as well as the bezel there, and the indices give the dial a really nice 3D look as well. And I just love this dial. When it plays with the light, it's just a thing of beauty. I do think that this watch is very versatile. So one thing that really stuck out to me was the fact that wearing it on a leather strap, you can get away with you wearing, this particular watch with a t-shirt, but also in a suit, and it does have that smart aesthetic to it as well. So I want to talk about the challenge of buying a vintage watch, because as I said, there's loads of worries when buying a vintage watch. You don't know whether it has hidden costs with servicing. condition of it. And with this particular watch, I mean, the case is in really good condition. There's definitely signs of wear on the dial, but I'm happy about that. I wanted it to be the original dial around the 3 o'clock mark. You can see some patina, and you can also see a little bit of patina around the top time where that is written as well. But that's what makes a vintage watch a vintage watch. You know, if there's no signs of aging or anything like that, then the charm is almost lost. But the key thing for me was, of course, the movement, it being serviced by Breitling. The dial originality, that's what really is the key when you're buying a vintage watch. You want to make sure it's got the original hands, the original indices, the original subdials, all that kind of stuff, because that's what makes it, you know, a vintage watch. Also the correct parts. It all has original Breitling parts. Of course, the actual leather strap I've got on it is a new strap. When it was serviced by Breitling, they replaced it with a new strap, which was great for me because it was, when I got it, it wasn't worn at all. And the buckle is also original Breitling strap as well. So it just ticked all the boxes. And as I said, it wasn't a watch that I was looking to buy for my first watch, but it was just an opportunity I couldn't pass on. And the gentleman I bought it from was such a nice guy. When I did meet him, I met him at a random pub in London. He has a business where he sells several different vintage watches, but we got talking about watches. He was wearing a vintage Rolex Explorer, which was beautiful. So, you know, we just got talking, and that also added to the experience. So what's it like owning and wearing a 58-year-old watch? I'm 30 years old, so it's almost double my age, which is crazy to think, but it just is a testament to great craftsmanship. When watches are made correctly and properly, they are made to last lifetimes, and this is a great testament to that. And honestly, I feel very grateful to be able to own this watch, especially being a Grail, because I know this is a watch that I'm not ever really going to get rid of. It's going to be in my collection for a very long time, and honestly, I think to the day I die. This has the original Valjoux movement, so it's a manual wind movement. The resistance when you're winding this when you're winding this dial is just beautiful. And I think there's something special because, you know, when you wind an automatic watch, it's one thing, but when you wind a manual wind watch, I'm sorry, I've just got some weird obsession with this watch for that reason. But I feel like watches, you're supposed to get hands-on with them as well. And I think when you have a manual wind movement, you have no excuse but to get hands-on with it. And then you just end up staring at the dial for a while and falling in love with the watch that you bought again. So that's the story of the first watch that I have bought myself. And, you know, it hasn't kick-started my obsession with watches, that's for sure. But the fact that this is the first watch I ended up buying and it was my vintage Grail just makes it that little bit more special. As I've mentioned, I want to know what your first watch was. Who bought it for you? I want to know what watch you bought yourself for the first time. And if there's any interesting stories, I'll be very, very interested to know. But yeah. If you've enjoyed this video, as I mentioned before, I'm really grateful to the 100 subscribers. Let's get to 500 subscribers. Make sure you like and comment. I've been Jag from Jag's Watches, and I hope my passion for watches has passed on to you and made you excited about, or reminded you of a story when you've bought your first watch. And remember, timing is everything. Peace.